All right. Welcome to today's Midweek. You may have noticed first that we are inside today. That's because it was raining outside quite a bit. I got very wet personally, but fortunately I had my JC Raulston Arboretum long sleeve t-shirt to keep me dry. So change into that. Which you can
purchase here.
You can purchase that here actually. This is not even the most exciting of our merchandise, so I would highly recommend that you check out some of what we have to offer. So we are not doing bed prepping today. Maybe we'll do that another day.
It's a good topic, but the first rule of Fight Club, bed prep, is don't bed prep when the soil is wet. So we had to do plan B, which any chance I get to talk about magnolias, I'm going to find an excuse to do that because we've got a good collection.
Right. So there's what you learn about bed prep. We figured it would be too short of a Zoom if we set up, we went out there and he told you, okay, it's wet outside, so don't. That would have been a little too quick.
Too quick.
So
too short.
We came in here and we got a lot of magnolias. In our opening shot, we featured Merrill for the first bit and then Eternal Spring for the last bit. Two very, very beautiful magnolias that we'll be talking a lot about today. And for those of us who are joining us on YouTube, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's start learning about magnolias.
Yes.
With Greg Paige.
Yes, that is who I am today. Yes, thank you for joining us. I hope you don't mind the shift too terribly. We are in Mark's office, so I think we're going to officially call this Magnolia in Mark's office. And I promise, Mark, we'll clean up after ourselves. We tried this a long time ago to do something in here, and the Wi-Fi was terrible, but we've since upgraded it. So this might become a thing. This might be the new hangout. But a good place to talk about magnolias. It literally just stopped raining, and the sun has come out, but not opportune to mess around with your soil when it's saturated and wet. So here we are today. Those of you that know me, I always try to point out the magnolias in our garden, and again, any chance I get to talk about them, I try to do. I have a long history of working with magnolias in all the gardens that I've worked at. Prior to coming here, my garden in Charlotte had the largest collection of magnolia cultivars in the world. Lots of magnolias, and right now, I can only imagine they're going full guns. We have a great collection here. We are part of a multi-site group that's part of the American Public Garden Association through a subset of groups called the Plant Collection Network. We're in good company with lots of other gardens around the country, and what that group does is kind of exchange germplasm when they need to, keep good records of things, help with collecting where we can, and we are very much a part of that and all facets of that. The Raulston has been known for years to have a good collection of magnolias. Prior to working here, I came here quite a bit to get cuttings and just kind of look and work with some of our local magnolia experts, Tom Krasinski and my good friend Pat McCracken. On that note, if you're looking for magnolias, and we'll put this in the Zoom notes somewhere in the not too distant future, Garden Treasures has a very good collection of them if you're looking to purchase, and I'll talk about some other ones. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is, before I get into the individual plants, is some sources that we have. Books, really good books that are worth a look if you want to go down the magnolia rabbit hole. This is the first one. This is from my brother from another mother, Andrew Bunting, and the Plant Lover's Guide to Magnolias. A really good, informative book with absolutely fabulous pictures. He covers a lot of topics in here. This is a must-have if you are a lover of magnolias and all that entails. Chef recommends. Another good one that's been around for a long time is Dorothy Calloway's book. There have been a lot of new cultivars that you will not find in this book, but it has a lot of really good cultural information about the flowers and the morphology and all that kind of stuff. and a lot of the good historical ones, many of which we have in our garden. They're in this book also. You can find this book for not a whole lot of money if you're able to look for it, but I recommend having this if you are a lover of magnolias as well. And another good book, I'm going to plug my good friend Roger Gosler from Gosler Nursery in Eugene, Oregon. I have bought plants from him and shared plant material for decades, and they are still selling magnolias. They have a great nursery, but this is a good book. They've got a lot of their magnolias in it and other things. I always try to recommend this when people ask me about good books for shrubs and other kind of smaller plants. This is a fantastic resource for that kind of stuff. And another shameless plug, go online, peruse their catalog. They have got the mail order thing down to an absolute science. If you're looking for things abroad and locally, Garden Treasures is a good one to go to. So I got that part out of the way. I always like to give that kind of information. Inevitably, people will ask at the end. But one of the things I like about magnolias is just the range of flowers. And we're limited today with things that are kind of early bloomers. And it's just kind of getting started. Tim and I have been kind of speculating when the best time will be to come. And this is another shameless plug with doing magnolias today, is to talk about coming to the garden to visit and looking for magnolias. So there's a lot of early things kind of peaking right now. But I would say next week, if we have these good consistent temperatures, things are really going to be exploding. Just running through the garden this morning to get these flowers cut before the weather came in, I was amazed at how much stuff had opened up just in the last couple days outside the realm of magnolias. Lots of witch hazels and cornus moss, cornelian cherry dogwoods blooming, and lots of other things. But the magnolias should really be up and running next week or the week after. So I like the variety of sizes that they grow. Some are kind of small shrub-like, some are great big stately trees. There's a magnolia for any spot that you have in your garden, and we've got a good collection to kind of peruse for those sorts of things. So I like the flower ranges and sizes. I like the shapes of them. And I really, really like the buds, if you can get a shot of that. This is Magnolia denudata. This is Forest Pink. And I love the tomentose bud coverings that they get. To me, that's a lot of winter interest, and I always kind of tout this as a winter interest plant because of those nice big fuzzy buds. Denudata is one of my favorite species, and they have great big flowers. They're kind of primitive looking, I think, and in the realm of trees, magnolias have kind of a primitive root system that requires a little more TLC. But outside of the flowers, you know, I'm always kind of championing things that look good, winter, spring, summer, fall, and magnolias fall into that for me. They may not have the greatest of fall color. Some of them, some do, but I love the buds and I love the color ranges. So that was the first one, just to kind of plug that kind of characteristic of them that I find really kind of fascinating and interesting. And in different lights, they really, really stand out and are super pretty. So most people are familiar with two types of magnolias. If you ask most people, they know saucer magnolia and they know star magnolia. So those, I thought, made the most sense to kind of start with. I'm looking down at my notes because I want to keep them in order. I've reached that point of the day where the synapses are slower in the brain, and I need my list to keep me on task. So the first one I want to talk about is this guy here. Is that a good enough orientation for you? This is Magnolia soulangeana, and that's the saucer magnolia. That's one of the first ones to bloom, and they get that kind of chalice-shaped flower. And this is pretty much the kind of the basic color range you think of, that kind of dark pink that turns almost kind of purplish, and there's whites in there when they first come out. These have opened up since I've cut them this morning, so they're cheating a little bit. They aren't quite that big out in the garden, but they will be within a couple days. This is a cultivar called Sundew. This one gets about 20 to 30 feet tall with about an equal spread, and that's pretty much the characteristic for saucer magnolia, Magnolia soulangeana, is they get a little bit big. They're kind of broad and open. They're typically early, so they typically get hit by the cold. And if you look on the tips, you can see some of these flowers got a little bit of cold damage a couple days ago when we dipped down into the low temperatures. Sundew is more of an upright, compact one, so this might be a better one for kind of smaller gardens in the realm of saucer magnolias. A lot of the older cultivars have some fragrance to them. This one doesn't have quite as much. I think some of the breeding has kind of bred that out. If you think about roses, it's the same kind of concept. So that is Magnolia soulangeana Sundew, and it's a nice one that we have here. I'm going to paint myself in a corner here with these when I try to get out of here today. The next soulangeana I want to talk about, and I'm going to take it out so that you can get it kind of upright. And that's a very typical soulangeana flower that, you know, it looks like a chalice almost, that nice kind of upright cup form to it. This is one called Pickard's Opal that I like a lot. And there's a whole series of these. They're a breeder named Amos Pickard in England. And at Canterbury, there's a big collection of these, all of his. I want to say there's 16 or 17 different magnolias that he's bred. Some people say they all look alike. I think they're very different and unique. And this is a super nice one that we have in the garden. But that's a very typical Magnolia soulangeana. You see where it gets the name saucer magnolia. And you can see the nice fuzzy buds on the buds behind it as they kind of open up. But just imagine the whole tree with those flowers in it, the amount of color and fragrance that you're going to get from something like that. Just a super, super nice one. So the next group are the stellatas, the star magnolias. And that's probably, to me, I think that's the most common one that you see because they're a little bit smaller. There's a lot of cultivars. There's a lot of work being done, and a lot of they're a little bit more landscape friendly than the saucer soulangeana. And this is just straight species, and this is what they typically look like. You have that nice white flower. You have that center rib that is kind of a pinkish purple, and there's more blush deeper down into the flowers. But that's typically what you see, 10 to 20 feet. More on the lower end of that, I would say 10 to 12, 10 to 15, and kind of a nice rounded spread. Lots and lots and lots of cultivars of the star magnolia, just like there are of the saucer. And one of my favorites, and I think this is one of Tim's favorites too. I'm going to go ahead and say that it is. He's not going to disagree. This is Magnolia stellata scented silver, and hence the name. I think it gets the silver because the white is so intense, and it also has, each of these petals is called a sepal, and this one can get up to 20 sepals, and that's a lot for a star magnolia. But very, very prolific, heavy bloomer, completely covers the tree in kind of a white shroud. As I mentioned, the silver, the white gets kind of shimmery in the light, and it's very, very fragrant. But I just love this particular magnolia because of the amount of flowers that it gets. It's absolutely covered from top to bottom. A nice rounded form, but just a really, really pretty one, and one of my favorites. This is a Frank Gallion hybrid, and he's done several. People always ask, why do you mention the people that breed? And I think it's important to kind of champion and remember, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to breed these. And I don't want people to forget about that. I think it's important to understand. And there's a lot of history with these. The Pickard's ones, there's a lot of interesting stories. Somebody should write a book about that, about some of these folks. A lot of the breeding was done in England. And if you're ever in that part of the world, it's good to kind of line up a trip to see some of these magnolias. But one of my favorites, you're gonna hear that word a lot today, favorites. In the realm of star magnolias, this is one of my favorite cultivars, scented silver. Very, very fragrant and a unique smell, I think. So that's the star magnolias. I'm going to dip into one of the groups that have been crossed with some other things. And these are Magnolia Loebnerni, some of the hybrids of those. And this is a cross between Magnolia cobus and Magnolia stellata, the star magnolia. And you can see the star magnolia in that. Just the shape of the flowers, a little bit fleshy, much bigger and more prolific. And to me, you get the best of both worlds. Magnolia cobus has a bigger, kind of fleshier flower, but not as many petals as this, and a little bit more robust than star, gets a little bit bigger. And this is Leonard Messel. This is a longtime favorite of a lot of people. This came from Max Loebner, who was a German breeder. And it's doing its typical thing. Mostly a white flower. There's some pink blush down in the center, and the flowering parts, if you can zoom in on those, Alexander, have a lot of color to them as well. And I think that's an added interest to them. This is one of those kinds of plants that, when we ask people to take pictures of plants, we want the big picture. It's impossible not to zoom in and get some of those colors. The colors in that are just intense, and just it's such an interesting plant with those very primitive flower parts. Just a great lesson in the botany and the morphology of a plant, and one of the many reasons I love magnolias. But great color, and this one's fragrant too. Not as fragrant as the other one, but also very fragrant. I mentioned the height of these. This one's gets on the bigger side, 20 to 30 feet. And I forgot to mention, I think we mentioned earlier, this is from the one in the White Garden. And right now, this guy is peaking even more so than yesterday. Worth a visit. I would drive over here just to look at this plant and go home. It's so kind of spectacular and really defines the White Garden at this time of the year. If I were going to get married in that garden, I'd do it right now, because it's actually absolutely gorgeous, doing its thing, and it's also pretty as the flowers senesce and kind of fade away. Just the shower of petals that come down. Great plant. Since this thing has been in here, the leaves have opened up in the buds. That's absolutely kind of crazy. Yeah, it's a gorgeous plant. One of my favorites. There's that word again.
It's hard to pick your favorite children.
Exactly. So this is another Magnolia X Loebnerni cultivar. I'm going to turn it this way and get these guys. Mm-hmm. So this was a sentimental favorite of mine in my garden in Charlotte. When I first interviewed for the job there, this guy was in full flower, and it was just jaw-dropping. This is Magnolia X Loebneri ballerina, and a little bit smaller than Merrill, a little more compact, much more delicate, I think, has kind of a nice oval shaped, and Magnolia cobus has an oval shape. This one reminds me the most of that side of its parentage. Kind of a nice peak and going down to the ground. If you can allow that in your garden, they can also be limbed up. But just gorgeous when it's all in flower. Very delicate through the rest of the year, with those little soft buds. But this time of the year, fragrant. I don't think it's as fragrant as the last one. But I like this because it's a little bit different than some of the other Loebneri cultivars, and there's quite a few of them. But sentimental favorite. I don't think we have this one here. Yes, we do. This came from here, obviously. But one of the ones that I really like to promote to people when they ask about some of these different cultivars. Next one I wanted to mention, the yellow ones are very popular and favorites. I'm going to leave that like that, if that's good for you. This is one of the earlier blooming yellows. This is Magnolia Goldfinch. I think it's one of the better cultivars. It really has that yellow color, and out in the sunlight, it really stands out much more. If you're looking for one that's not going to consume your yard and is a little on the smaller side, this is one that I would throw people towards. It's kind of more upright than oval shaped. It's easy to limb this one up. Another one that comes to mind that blooms later that's relatively easy to find is butterflies. That's one of the most intense yellows out there, but that'll be coming along later in the bloom season. That one stays a little bit smaller. But I like the form of this. This is at the top of our main lawn, And it's cheating a little bit. It's not this open out in the garden. These flowers have opened up since I brought them in here this morning at 7:30. But really, really pretty. All parts of it, the inner workings of the flower, the petals themselves, and in different light, it really, really stands out. But these are, this is one of the two that I recommend to people with smaller gardens. There's a whole host of other ones out there. This is one that was developed by Phil Savage. I think he was a breeder in Michigan that was looking at kind of cold hardy ones. So I think this one has strong cold hardiness also, if I'm not mistaken. But a great yellow, and when this thing starts blooming, everybody runs up there to look at it this time of the year. Tim and I have been keeping our eye on it as the buds have swollen and have checked in up until the point where it's starting to show some color. I think did he bring the group up there yesterday on his tour?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, of course he did. So Magnolia Goldfinch. The next thing I want to talk about are some of the evergreen ones that are starting to flower now. And when most people think about evergreen magnolias, the first thing that comes to mind are the southern magnolias. And that's a late spring, early summer bloomer. Some other evergreen bloomers are Sweet Bay, Magnolia virginiana. Again, some of my favorite magnolias are virginianas. This is Magnolia maudii, just straight species. This one is a broadleaf evergreen, keeps the evergreen leaves all year long. It's known for these great, big, fleshy, large flowers and a lot of work and breeding of evergreens. This is one of the parents that is typically used, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of stuff. I'll leave that stuff to my other brother from another mother down in Spartanburg, South Carolina, Kevin Paris, who's done a lot of breeding work with evergreens. But in his deep, dark secrets of his houses and out around the campus, he has quite a few of these. This one came from the Japanese garden, and these have been in the garden for quite a while. They've gotten some size on them, and they kind of anchor the corners of the Japanese garden. Blooming their heads off right now. Fragrant to a degree, but I like that big fleshy flower that they get. And these are absolutely covered. If you walk in the Japanese garden, there's one in the back that's covered from top as far as you can see down to the ground with these big fleshy white flowers right now. So again, I'd get in my car and drive here right now just to look at this one. And while you're here, walk over to the white garden and look at our friend that's in there also. But also kind of egg-shaped as they first kind of form out. And I think my friend Kevin has worked on one that's called a dozen eggs. I think that has maudii in it. I may be mistaken, but I love the flowers on this.
It's a great name.
Yeah, it looks like a dozen eggs. So last one in the list here of evergreens. And again, this is a perennial favorite here because of what it's doing right now. I think it started a little bit late this year, which isn't a bad thing because we had some cold weather. This is Magnolia Eternal Spring. This is a cross between Magnolia laevifolia and Magnolia maudii, the last one we just looked at. Much smaller, much more compact. I think much more kind of delicate and refined. The foliage is a little bit cleaner. The flowers are much smaller and kind of unified, but the fragrance on this is spellbinding and kind of knock your socks off. It's strong, it's potent, but it's not a bad thing. I think it smells nice. Something you'd want to shower your body with. It'd be nice to smell like that. We've got a rank smell down in our building right now, so we're going to bring this down there to kind of help correct that and fix that problem straight away. This one comes from our friends at Camellia Florist. This is one that they developed. We always like to champion them. But if there's a chance that you could fit this in your garden somewhere, this is one to do that. One of the other things that's good about it, one of the other benefits is this will bloom for up to 4 weeks. If you're lucky, if the stars align and you have good, consistent weather, which when magnolias start blooming, all bets are off. Chances are you're going to get a cold snap and you're going to suffer that heartbreak. and you'll get what we call the used or the brown tissues on the plant. But this one blooms for a long time. So, and it's kind of consistent. You'll get some damage to some of the flowers, which we have because it started about a week ago. But there's so many kind of buds in reserve that those are kind of quickly washed away, and you get these coming really quickly. Again, I hate to say favorite, but this is a favorite evergreen. And it's one of those things where it's been a long, dark winter, and it's nice when things finally start to bloom and come out. This one, I always look forward to this blooming, and it's been in many of my gardens. Chef recommends. Something I failed to talk about with Maudii, the one that we showed earlier, that has kind of a wide spread. I've seen it, and my friend Andrew says this in his book, but I have pictures somewhere in my library of photographs. It's used as a street tree because of that flowering and that evergreen nature. I don't know if we could get away with that here, but it harkens to reminding people that it's good to have a diversity of things and use these a little bit more. So that's why we like to promote these. So I knew that I would blow through these in record time. It's hard to contain my excitement for magnolias. I hope there's some questions out there. Had we done the bed prep, that would have gone on and on and on. We had a whole host of things to talk about, but this is kind of what's blooming right now in the magnolia world that caught my eye, and that Tim was yelling across the garden from me this morning, telling me to go look at this one or that one. So this is what's cooking. Do we have any burning questions?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, Chef Greg, I just want to say what an astounding amount of information you have in your head. It's
crazy.
Very impressive, and
it's crazy.
Yeah.
I like to share it because one day it's going to be gone.
Right. Yeah. As there's so many things.
It's going to disappear.
But what a wide assortment of magnolias here. And one question I saw that I really liked was somebody asked, let's see if I can get the name. Diane Schaffer asked, what makes a magnolia a magnolia? For example, some are evergreen versus deciduous.
Yeah.
So what are kind of the characteristics of a magnolia versus other plants?
So that is a good question. And I don't know if I can answer it, but I'll do my best. Almost 20 years ago, maybe longer, they reclassified magnolias. So for example, Maudii used to be called Michelia. So they did genetic work, and they lumped that into the genus Magnolia. There were also a couple of other things that were kind of lumped into that. So, that Magnolia acacia is the family of Magnolia. That's where things start first. And, the typical things, if you look at the flowers of the evergreens and the deciduous, the flower parts and pieces are all the same. So that's another characteristic. If you look at that, you see the way that the sepals are, all the flowering, the sexual parts inside. The seeds are very, very similar. I've looked at magnolias from Maine to Florida to, well, not Maine, all through the United States and Taiwan and Vietnam and Japan. And they all have those characteristics. The buds, the flowers, the seed pods are kind of the same. That's what draws them to. Where these things are from, the Magnolia stellata is native to Japan. So is soulangeana. Maudii is an Asian species. Some of our native species, some of the big leaf ones, if you look at those flower parts and pieces, they're the same. The seeds are the same. That's the best unscientific, going down that rabbit hole answer that I can come up with. I hope that answers her question remotely. If it doesn't, come visit us. Get in your car right now and come look at some of these that are blooming.
Right, that's what I'm hearing. You should just come over.
Just come on over.
I'd like to move into culture a little bit for now. So Suzanne and Braden asks, what is a variety that does well in partial shade, as in 4 hours or less of full sun? And then on top of that, what do magnolias usually like in terms of sunlight? And we'll move into other culture stuff.
Yeah. In order to get good flowers, you need more than 4 hours of sun a day. You can get away with a little bit less with some of the evergreen ones, But for the deciduous ones, they need more sun to produce flowers. And depending on the size of your yard, there are smaller cultivars that will work better. There's a whole series of deciduous magnolias called the little girl hybrids that were developed at the National Arboretum. And those are ones that I kind of throw people to from a size perspective. But the light requirements, most flowering plants need more sun to produce the flowers. You can get away with less, but you might not have as many flowers.
Gotcha. So less sun means less flowers. That sounds pretty typical of a lot of plants.
It is, in most cases.
And then much earlier, Gail Henderson mentioned that she planted a small magnolia last fall. She wants to know kind of the care that goes into it. So could you talk a little about the soil conditions, watering, and fertilizer that might help start off a good magnolia
That's
plant?
A good question. I mentioned that magnolias have kind of a primitive root system. It's very, very fleshy. So mulch is a very important thing. Not too much, 3 to 4 inches, not on the root flare. So let me back up. Moist, well-drained soil is best. They can take a certain amount of clay, but good garden soil is best for good flower production and healthier magnolias. Buy good quality plants, find good sources so that you're planting something that's healthy to begin with. Planting at the right depth, don't plant them too deep. Magnolias don't like to be planted too deep. Most of the deciduous ones don't like wet feet. Some of the evergreens can tolerate that to a degree, but again, moist, well-drained soil. Mulch 3 to 4 inches. They really don't need a lot of fertilizer. That's something that I would do a soil test of your garden to determine that first. If you see signs of chlorosis, the leaves don't look so good, that might be a micronutrient or mineral deficiency. In terms of pests, yes, deer are gonna, for whatever reason, they're attracted to magnolias. The stems have a certain smell, so I think that was a very popular plant for my garden in Charlotte for them to rub their horns on, I think because of the smell, unfortunately. So we would do cages on our younger trees. Insect pests, there's a magnolia scale that they get and some other scale insects. That's usually a stress associated thing. They're susceptible to the cold. Usually that's just flowers. When the flowers get burnt, people ask me, are they dead? No, just those fleshy flowers are sensitive to temperature. The plant itself is usually fine. Plants that are under stress are very susceptible to ambrosia beetle. I have noticed people that over prune their magnolias, that stresses the plant out, and ambrosia beetle is attracted to those pheromones that plants give off when they're under stress. Those are the basic things to kind of worry about. They don't need a lot of pruning typically. Be mindful of how big they're going to get. Some of these do get kind of big and they need their space. Try to lean towards ones that are a little bit smaller in nature that will work better in your garden. I've seen these used as espaliers. Some of the evergreens work really, really well. If you have limited space and want to try to prune, I've seen a couple of deciduous ones done that way. But try to find the right plant for the right spot and be mindful of space. I think that's important.
Right. On that note, Paul Soltero asks, do you have a smaller, like less than 15 feet cultivar that you just have to have?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. There are some smaller ones that do well.
The butterflies you mentioned of the yellow?
Butterflies it's kind of a lankier one, but smaller. That's a good one. Easy to find usually, and the flowers are unbelievably yellow, super, super bright. I've got some pictures of it, and every time I use those pictures for a talk, it looks like it's fake, but it's not. I mean, that would be worth a Google. Off the top of my head, I can't think of ones that stay kind of small, but there are some out there. I would look at some of the mail order places and kind of see what they're selling, because they tend to move in that direction, I think.
Okay. We got an interesting question here. I'm going to very quickly read it and make sure I understand it. But it sounds like Susan, I'm not going to try to say her last name. Susan is asking that it's hard to plant underneath magnolias because of a chemical they put out. Is that true? And her final question is, it seems like she would like to plant azaleas underneath them, or she's taking suggestions.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a chemical they produce to inhibit other plants. I don't think that's the case. I wouldn't plant underneath them because of their kind of fleshy root system. If you do, you're going to have to kind of be careful with that. You don't want to, I talked to somebody today about planting underneath mature trees, and that's always kind of a slippery slope. You don't want to really disturb the roots if at all possible. If you do it in a way that you're not disturbing the roots. But you also have to be mindful that trees produce a lot of roots, and whatever you plant underneath them are going to have to compete with that root system. And a lot of times the trees because it's a bigger, connected, more extensive root system, they're going to pull a lot of moisture out of the ground, and whatever you plant underneath it's going to suffer. So just be mindful of that.
So it'd have to be a more drought tolerant plant?
It'd have to be something more drought tolerant. I always kind of, this is my crutch for that answer, and I use it during the gardening in the South last week, is come here and look at what we've done with some plantings.
Right, maybe get in your car and
come visit. Please come. Yeah, it's a nice day now. The sun's out. But this is a great place to walk around and get examples of things like that. And the place I always point people to, I'm starting to sound like an auto recording here. Right in the front entrance under the live oaks, we've done a really good job of incorporating plants of all different sizes and layers, herbaceous things, bulbs, smaller trees and shrubs underneath that layer of those big canopies without disturbing the root system. And it's a good example of what you can use that's kind of drought tolerant. And there's other places in the garden where we've done that as well. But it's always kind of a slippery slope when you start to disturb the root systems, and magnolias are extremely sensitive to that in particular.
One thing I might add is if you're going to plant a shrub underneath the tree, then start with a smaller shrub. Yeah. So that you're, as you said, doing less digging into that root system, and then impact establish within each other.
Yeah, the impact isn't as big.
Right.
If you really want to get super technical, there's a tool called, and I just talked to somebody on the phone about this today, ironically enough, called an air spade. That I've used that moves the soil without disturbing the tree roots. It's not something that the average homeowner can do, unfortunately. A lot of universities use it to look for water lines, fiber optic lines, and that kind of stuff. And I know other folks at that level that use it to till up their beds for annuals and things. But that is used to loosen up compacted soil to alleviate that for the health of trees. And I have used that system to plant under trees in the past, but I was lucky to work somewhere where we had one of those. It's not an average homeowner thing, unfortunately.
Right. Quick question. I don't remember if you touched on this, but is fall the best time to plant magnolias?
I think it is. The plant's going to go dormant. It's more conducive and less stressful, I think, on a plant with kind of fleshy root systems. I've certainly planted a lot of magnolias in the spring and have had decent success with that. It's all about the aftercare. It's all about making sure they get just the right amount of moisture, the planting at the right depth and the right planting procedures, mulching. All those things are super critical. And in the fall, when the days are shorter, the temperatures are a little less harsh, and plants are starting to go dormant, it just makes a whole lot more sense than that. If you have the option to wait till fall, wait till the fall. If Mark is a big advocate of this, and I subscribe to it too. When you've got time is usually the case. I wouldn't do it in the dead of summer during a drought. You're going to have a dead magnolia, and I'm embarrassed to say that I was given a what's our introduction here, the Evergreen one.
Don't know off the top of my head.
Doggone it! I had one, and I've been nursing it along since last spring, and I missed watering it for a week this winter, and it went instantly.
Really?
Heartbreaking. But
so you don't want to make more of that watering work for yourself when it's summer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you miss a day in summer, and it's really it's cooked.
Or if you go into a drought, and you're more likely to have harsher weather in the summer.
Serendipity. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Serendipity. Another quick question. Gail asks, is there a certain type of mulch you like? I assume you will say double or triple shredded hardwood.
whatever works, with a caveat. Triple shredded looks good. It's got good organic matter. It's already kind of in a state where it's starting to decompose. The simplest, easiest way to improve plant health care and soil is mulch, and that could be wood chips or triple shredded. Wood chips that are aged a little bit work fine. I don't like bark chips; they float around. I don't like pine needles because
Too acidic.
There isn't enough. They break down too quick.
Okay.
And they don't provide, the things that mulch does are important to consider. They keep the temperature consistent. They help from losing moisture. They help add organic matter as they break down, and they reduce compaction. I love how pine needles look. I love how easy you can pick up 2 or 3 bales, and they're easy to spread. I love the look of them, but they just break down too quickly. They don't hold a lot of moisture. They don't do good with the swings in temperature. I tell people if you have to do them, have something down underneath that's breaking down, or change them out more frequently. I've also seen some terrible fires that have been started by people flipping cigarettes into them or other things. And I've got a good story about my neighbor's Boy Scout troop in Charlotte that set a church sign on fire that we were mulching with pine needles. But triple shredded is my favorite. It looks good. Or if you want to do one better, mix that with some leaf compost.
Right.
And we use leaf compost here. That's good, but we're constantly replenishing it. So keeping that layer to 2 to 3 inches is important.
Right. I had a quick question. Where do you get triple shredded? There's a lot of local places, Atlantic and Triangle Landscape Supply are
sources for mulch.
Sources I use.
Sources of mulch. It depends on where you live. There are a lot more commercially available to the average homeowner. I don't know if they do it here, but in Charlotte, the city composted leaves and hardwood, and they had a site out near the airport in Charlotte where you could go, and it was relatively inexpensive. A pickup truck load was very, very reasonable. And I had neighbors that would go out there with trailers and get mulch. We are lucky to have on site here. We compost leaves, and a lot of our tree company friends will dump their wood chips here for us. So we're lucky to be able to get it for free. You can also, I think it's chip dump. I have had mixed success with that.
Right.
But I know people. What is it?
Chip drop.
Chip drop.
Right.
I think it's a website where you plug in your address and people.
The arborists come. And also you can pretty much only get 20 cubic yards.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
But if you've got a good sized garden, it goes pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's usually good stuff too, because it's mixed in with leaf matter and other stuff that'll decompose quickly. So if you have the space for it, I'd recommend it. It's super cheap. I think they might even do it for free. You just pay for delivery. I believe it's like you just pay for delivery.
I think it is.
And they're great guys, super nice people. So if you can do that and you need all that, that's always good. Cool. Someone linked that in the chat. Thank you very much. I was going to ask about dyed mulch. That's a question I get all the time. Can I use a dyed mulch?
Yes. There has been some research to see about leaching. I don't know where that has ended up, but that is something to consider. It cannot not be a possibility. I've
always shied away from it personally.
I don't like it. It just doesn't, to me, it doesn't look good. It's not natural. I've got tons of pictures of it in use. And when I do talks, I try to steer people away from it. It usually doesn't last. I know that commercially you can buy something to color it up with. And I have used that in some places that I worked. It's typically a plant-friendly thing that will darken it up, but you're kind of missing the point with the mulch at that point is when it starts to fade and it starts to break down, maybe it's time to refresh it anyway.
Right, you want it to break down.
You want it to break down, and you want to add more to it so that it's constantly recharging the soil and doing all those things that I talked about culturally that mulch is supposed to do.
The mulch functions.
Yeah.
You mentioned pests.
Yes.
Are magnolias sensitive to sprays?
Like any plant, they can be the end result of improper herbicide application. because they are sensitive to that sort of thing. I always tell people to read the label. If you spray a lot of most herbicides above a certain temperature, some of those chemicals can volatilize. They turn into gas, and the gas floats wherever. And I've seen horrible pictures of plants that have been destroyed that way. If you spray any kind of insecticide, again, the timing is crucial with that. You don't want to spray insecticides on plants when they're in flower, because you're going to,
destroy the flower.
There aren't a lot of pollinators that go to magnolias. They're pollinated, oddly enough, by beetles. But I'm looking at this plant right here, and there's a spider on this flower right there. So insecticide spray is that there's a timing for that. And we're not in the business of recommending that, but it's something to consider when you're using soaps and oils to control some pests. Timing is very, very crucial for that, to get the best control. But any plant, I tell people to be careful around when you're doing any kind of, if you're treating pest on another plant and a magnolia is close by, it's something to consider. Any plant. It's something to consider.
Right, lawns and
anything.
So if you have to apply something, you'd want to apply on a cool and overcast day. Is that true?
I think that's the best thing. And again, timing of whatever you're trying to treat is important.
Right.
There are times of the year when treating an insect like a scale I mentioned. There are better times of the year to do that than others. You want to do that when the insect is the eggs have hatched and the crawlers have come out, and that's going to be very, very soon.
Right. So timing based on the pest. Yep. Okay. Now, this is a question I had. You mentioned fuzzy buds. Is that a helpful trait for the plant? Why are the buds fuzzy?
That's a good question. The thing that I've been told is it's a cold hardiness thing. I don't know if that's true or not, but just looking at kind of a spent one here, I mean, that wraps that bud pretty well. And it's got to have some sort of characteristic that helps kind of protect it from temperature swings. Depending on the day of the week and what side of the fence you are with climate change, it is a thing. And it seems like these guys are blooming earlier and earlier every year. I think this year we had more of a real winter. So I didn't see that as much in the garden with a lot of things, but that's got to be the thing to me. And there might be some properties where there's some. It's less likely that insects are going to interfere with the flowers. I mean, that's how that plant reproduces itself. So there's a lot of genetics in there that it's developed to help protect that, encapsulating it with that soft thing to keep insects from wanting to get in. I think all those things are at bay. I'm going to defer to my good friend Kevin Paris. He espouses those facts anytime I'm lucky to be in his company.
So get in your car and go see Kevin Paris.
Get in your car, drive 8 hours, 6 hours down to Spartanburg,
South Carolina,
and tell him I sent you.
Right, he'll help.
I need to be better on that kind of that side of.
Oh, I'd say you have plenty of knowledge, Greg. I'd say you have plenty of knowledge.
Some of it's not the most useful. We could talk about mountain running for days.
That's pretty useful.
It can be.
Can you remind us again, where can I find some of these cool hybrids or cultivars to purchase?
Think globally and act locally first. We've got some great garden centers in the Raleigh area and Chapel Hill, Durham, and beyond. I have yet to take advantage of them, and I hope to do some of that this weekend. Start there. Garden Treasures, Pat McCracken is the guru of magnolias and always has been. And he's got I was looking at his website today and drooling over some things. They're open by appointment only now, but should be open fairly soon. I think there's a pretty good supply of magnolias at Camellia Forest. Those are the big ones that I think of. If you're a commercial person, I could list 100 growers, and the North Carolina Nursery Landscape Association board is right across from us meeting today. There's some great places there to kind of start. And then look at mail order. Gosler that I mentioned, They've got a ton of magnolias in their catalog. Their website is great, so you can get a better kind of bird's eye view of what they're doing from a magnolia perspective. And they've got mail order down to an absolute science. They really know how to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of our mail order sources for magnolias didn't make it through COVID or didn't make it through generation gaps where people have passed away and there wasn't anybody to kind of pick up the banner. Broken Arrow Nursery up in Connecticut is another good one, mail order source. My good friend Dick Janey, who is the owner of the nursery. Friends from Magnolia Society, that's another way to fall into some of these amateur breeders that are doing stuff and become friends with them, and they like to give plants away. I always try to sneak some in to our Raulston blooms. Don't tell Mark, but I always try to sneak a few in there. It's hard to put them on the plant cart because they get too big. Typically, I would love to do some cuttings to put on the cart. I'm a big fan of the big leaf magnolias, Magnolia macrophylla, and all those allies. Those are good to start from seed, and those would work out well on the plant cart. We might try to do that in the not too distant future. But those are a handful of places.
Awesome. We're about to wrap it up here, but as you mentioned seeds, I did want to ask one last question, which is, can you harvest the seeds? And if you're interested in going and trying to do a little amateur breeding yourself, how would you grow on those seeds?
Again, I encourage you to become a part of Magnolia Society. There's a lot of people in that group that do that. The Magnolia Society has a seed exchange if you're a member. And I'm not sure when that is this year. I used to help with that. And since I moved 3 hours away, I don't get involved with that as much as I used to. But that's a good thing to keep an eye on because you're getting seeds not just from local people, but it's a big international group.
Right.
And they're sending in things, and there are people that send in crosses of things that they've tried and messed around with, or things that they've collected in the wild, which is always kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of collecting of endangered species of magnolias, and seed is the way to go with them. And there's certain times of the year when the seeds are ripe, but success is usually pretty good with seeds of magnolias. But join the Magnolia Society. It's an amazing group of human beings, and they're doing really good work. And if you're interested in magnolias, you should be a part of that group.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope you had an awesome time. I know I did. Get outside, enjoy some of this beautiful weather. If it is not rainy and sunny by you, as it is here, please come to the Arboretum. We love it here, so we can't recommend enough for you guys to come out here and see all the plants we have. This is just a small array of some of the stuff that's in bloom right now. It always amazes me how many new things are in bloom each week that you walk through the garden.
It's crazy.
There's some tiny irises in the scree garden that smell great. They're that big. Like the leaves, the flowers are bigger than the leaves. Anyway, check out our Saturday sessions, and please keep tuning into our midweeks. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Greg Paige.
Thank you, Evan. Good job subbing for our friend, what's his name?
Blake.
Blake.
Yeah, glad to be here. Pleasure.